Welcome to Chat TPT, a podcast about music business from the unique perspective of content creators in the trumpet community. We are so excited to have you here with us today as we dive into the world of trumpet playing, content creation, and everything in between. We hope that you'll find a supportive and inclusive space with us where musicians from all backgrounds can learn, collaborate, and support one another. Today, we might as well talk about things to think about when going to college, like when applying for college, because
Okay.
some people don't have a mentor to sort of guide them through. They're like, oh, I want to go to music school, and then
Yeah.
they're just sort of like thrown into it. So maybe some tips that you've found helpful or things that you've talked to your students about.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to start? Would you want to start?
I'm gonna
Okay.
type it out, my question in my little boxy thing to keep my brain
Sure.
focused.
That's awesome. Honestly, we should do that we should both open up a Google Doc and we should just type in our questions and follow. Um, okay. The number one thing that a lot of students that I've worked with through my career, and as I mentioned, I've taught college for 7 years and I've taught private lessons since about 12 years ago. We'll say it that way. So I've been teaching for a good amount of time, and I've gotten to see a lot of students of different passions and of different desires and of different capabilities. The first thing to understand is not all schools are for everyone, right? One student might be great for Juilliard, for example, or Jacob School, for example, and another student might be great for um, you know uh, Rice Conservatory, for example. And if you don't know what the difference between those colleges are, it's first of all really, really important to understand what the differences are. And it's important to understand if that overall community is going to be the right fit for you. And that's where you start. Um, Oftentimes, the things that serve as determining factors for students is how they feel when they step on campus. So it becomes an aesthetics game very easily. Like, this hall is so beautiful. This studio is so big. This marching band is so loud. Whatever the case may be. Or on the converse side of things, like this university is really small, or whatever the case may be, right? Um, and those are factors that give you good and warm fuzzy feelings when you're there on campus if you become a student there, right? But a lot of the things that are going to have a larger impact, significantly so, are who are going to be your professors, first of all, right? What is your priority as a musician? Are you looking to become a military band musician? Because if so, you may not want to go to a school that specializes in orchestral auditions. You may not want to go to a school that specializes in opera or Broadway. You may not want to do those types of things, right? You may not want to go to a teacher who has no experience in the world of military bands or has not ever sent a student there, right? And so those are the things that are important for you to make note of. And at the very least, you don't want to go to a school where nobody else has that dream if you can help it, because there's no way for you to know if it's going to work for you in that area without you having to put a bunch of extra work for it in order to make that happen. Now, the reality is you are capable of anything and everything that you set your mind to. The important aspect is how much time does it take, how much effort, and how conducive is the environment around you to helping you to achieve those goals. And if you're going to be in an environment that's counterintuitive, you might as well not go to college at all. You can be in a counterintuitive environment without having to pay for it every semester, right? Without having to wake up at 8 a.m. to go to your class, or wake up at 7 a.m. to go to your 8 a.m. classes, right? Without having to go to a professor who's going to maybe not necessarily even help you to achieve your goals, right? So those are the things that you want to start and you look for. You want to think mid to long term, right? You want to think, all right, I'm going to be here 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, depending on whatever it is you want to do. Do you want to get that's another thing to consider. You may not know at the beginning that is okay. Are you going to get a bachelor's and go out and get a job, right? Is the goal to get a job as soon as possible? Are you going to go out and get a master's degree? Are you going to get a doctoral degree, a performance diploma, whatever it is? And if you know these things, they will help to determine your decision. If you don't know these things, then you go out and you seek the environment and the relationships, and that is your biggest priority regardless. But that's what you're going to base a big part of your decision on when you go to college. So the way this looks is, do you go to a school and absolutely fall in love with the professor and think, wow, this is a really good fit for me, and this professor understands the challenges I go through. This professor has had students who currently hold the job that I'm looking to get, or this professor isn't afraid to stay up to date to the times, and I'm looking to be that cutting edge person who, the first musician who builds a professional career entirely on threads, right? Or whatever the case may be, right? And my professor is willing to explore those realms. This is the right person for me. Or I go through the unique challenges of a transgender musician going through a male dominated world, right? And it's important to find a professor who is at least going to be empathetic and supportive and to give you the resources that are necessary for you to progress through that in a healthy manner, right? But these are the things you want to take a look at. Obviously, the professor has a really big bearing on the overall environment around you, particularly in your studio. And so that's going to be a really important element as well. If you get those right, it really doesn't matter like you think it does, how large or how small the college is, how new or how old the facilities are. The things that you're going to take with you are going to be the relationships that you build with your colleagues. It's going to be the lessons that you learn from your professors and the connections that spawn from a result of that. And so those are the things that are most important when you look for colleges. Now, beyond that, there is a factor that we don't look at nearly as much as we should either, and that is the factor of finances, your financial situation, right? And it's something we don't want to look at because musicians don't do what we do for money, right? And none of us do, right? However, the reality is, and we've had this discussion before, right? A little bit at least. When you look 5 years in advance, or 6 years, or 8 years, or whenever, right? Whenever you go out and you start paying off your student loans and you get a place to stay, because we live in an economy that is based off of inflation, the cost of living when you graduate will be higher than the cost of living today. And so you want to put that into account and understand that you're going to be paying more than you think you will just to sustain yourself. And it's important to take a look at what that's going to mean for you when you graduate, right? So you don't have to go super, in high detail, but if it's costing you $40,000 out of your own pocket a year, right? Or 2 years or whatever, and you're taking 100% or 80% or 60% out loans, and you're going to have to pay that off in a 25-year lifespan, right? And it's going to cost you as much as a mortgage might cost today. You're going to want to consider opportunities that will mitigate that cost, because the reality is, you go through the college and you build all these skills and you're building your career. And if your finances are climbing at a faster rate than your ability to meet them, right? If your bills are climbing at a faster rate than your ability to meet them, then you're forced. And this has happened to so many musicians, so many extremely capable musicians. You're forced to pay your bills. So you pick up whatever job that helps you to pay the bills. Which often means goodbye music. And then what was the point of majoring in music in the first place, right? Other than, the experiences are obviously very valuable, right? But if the goal is to get a career in music, and then you graduate and you find yourself out of options, then ultimately the goal that you set out for was all for naught. At least it can seem that way, right? So we just want to consider those types of things. So it is very important, if a school is a really great fit, and it's offering you financial compensation if you're getting scholarship money, et cetera. That is a big factor. Now, if it's not a good school, it doesn't matter how much money they give you, right? That's not a factor at all. You want to have a good fit, like we said, the right environment, the correct teacher, an environment that's conducive for your growth. But beyond that, if you're looking to decide between one school and another school, we do have to acknowledge that finances is a factor because it's going to set you up for how you're able to sustain yourself in the future. Anyway, those are the things that I look for, and I have my students go through as well. And what it can be as well is your teachers, as long as your teachers are aware, right, that your situation is changing. There are so many people um, who have been teaching for a certain period of time, or just people in general in the world, people who are the age of our government officials and whatnot, who just don't understand, right? From 2019 to 2023, this is a statistic. Maybe I need to look up. I might look up the specific statistic to give it to you guys before the end of this recording. But um, the cost of a mortgage has become over twice your the average household income in 4 years. So the idea that you're going to take advice about how to get a house from someone who got a house before 2019, right? Let alone like 1990, right? It's just not up to date. So these are things that we have to know that people are going to understand the challenges that you are going through to help set you up for success. So
I mean, everything that you said about things to think about when going to college is like, it's a very important thing. And I feel like when I was going to college, I wasn't really thinking about that stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so everything sort of just like evolved as I've been going through. But I definitely think like getting into a studio with a teacher that like relates to you and that understands you and that's going to push you and that's going to respect you as a musician and all of those things is like very important. And also like the way that they treat their students also is reflected in the atmosphere within the studio, so like how the students treat each other. So I feel like that's super important because music school can be really really tough, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of the things. So having a space where you feel supported and you feel understood is really really important for like just surviving all of it. But the other thing that I was thinking, and it's not like super, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about it before, but if you really want to be a trumpet soloist, you should find a school where they have like good collaborative pianists and they've got that. And I didn't even think about that until this past year because there's a shortage at the University of Illinois for collaborative pianists, and like nobody can find anybody to accompany their recitals or do anything like that. And I was really lucky to have some amazing pianists at my other school. And it's not that there weren't amazing pianists at Illinois, they were just so overworked that they wouldn't take on any more people. And so if that's something that you're interested in, like, doing solo stuff, either find a best friend who's a collaborative pianist who's going to work with you, or like do your research and see like what are the other departments doing. Like if the piano department is only solo pianists, I mean that's a completely different thing than collaborative piano. Like they they're not trained to like listen and do the chamber music as efficiently as collaborative pianists do and like are trained to do. So I think that was one of the things this year that I realized. I was like, oh man, if you
yeah,
wanna if you wanna do solo stuff, you gotta actually find someone to collaborate with.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we want to be very clear of something. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do when you start your college degree, right? If you just know, I just want to do music, then absolutely. You go there and you build your passions and etc. And as you build and grow and develop your skills as a whole and you get those experiences, your career will be clarified through that process. But it is so important, so important to find the right teacher and to find the right community And I absolutely agree. If you're able to find an area where, whatever your goals are well met in that environment, 100% that becomes a very strong factor. University of Southern California is really strong for film scoring, right? If you want to be a composer and you want to get into that field, right? That's an example of something that would be a factor versus maybe going to a school that has a strong composing school, but nobody who does that goes into film scoring. They go somewhere else. They go into Broadway, or they go into the extremely niche world of contemporary classical music, right? That's great. You're going to learn a lot of great things, really great things for that field, but they may or may not work with the dream that you're actually going for, right? Like you were saying, Kayla. I mean, it is extremely important to have a strong, group of collaborative pianists available at your disposal. Sometimes that means if you have a friend in the area who's really great, right? Um, but most of the time that means you want to learn about that program. So absolutely, if you know what you want to do, then you want to be looking for those elements that are going to be important to expose you to. And most of us don't think about these things before we start college because we just don't know to think of them, right? So when they're in your mind, um, take them to account, right? And make sure you have that priority of finding the environment that's conducive for your growth. But beyond that, everything else is going to be, it's going to serve that positive factor. So if you go to, again, if you're trying to decide between 2 or 3 great schools and they're offering you, they have great offers, and you can see yourself working in those studios with those teachers, and you can see the future with any of them. Some of these factors will be very strong determining factors. If you realize that for example, if you go to a recital, studio recital from them, as a high school student, and you watch things happen, and you notice that, the pianists are dropping beats, or they don't communicate with each other at all on the performance and whatnot, and that's going to be your bread and butter. At least that's your goal, right? To be a solo musician, then you want to get as much experience as possible to play with a collaborative pianist and of quality. And if you are not seeing an opportunity to do that, that could be a reason as to why you might choose another school that has more opportunities or higher quality opportunities to perform with collaborative pianists. The other thing as well is you might be able to find really strong pianists, but you have to pay them more because they have a larger their business has grown further, they have more experience, or whatever the case may be. And you want to ask yourself, am I willing to and able to sustain that? Am I able to go to this school that maybe doesn't have a wide pool of pianists, but I want one of them to prioritize my work, so I'm willing to pay them double for their services, right? Are you willing and able to do that? If you get a full ride to your dream school and you're picking up a part-time job, especially if that part-time job has to do with music, right? And you're building your experience that way, that might be a very great way to spend your money, because you might be, for example, taking out your cell phone, which, by the time you graduate, if you're going to college now, by the time you graduate, you're going to get studio quality multi-camera, presentations out of one singular cell phone, right? They're just progressing that fast. I don't know if, as a side note, I don't know if you've seen some of those pictures, Kayla, of the Samsung's new phone, the new Galaxy phones, at the Taylor Swift concerts, where they're like sitting a mile away and they're zooming into 800%, and it looks like they're right there. It's kind
That's
of crazy.
that is wild.
It's so wild. But and both with like photo and with video. But you might be in a situation where, if you find a strong pianist, right, and you're looking, if we're just taking this example as you potentially wanting to be a professional world-class touring soloist, right? Um, you can have a great pianist play with you, and at any point you could just set a phone up on a tripod or with a ring light or on a music stand and record yourself rehearsing and put that up for everyone to see. And if you can trust that what you're doing is going to be of a quality that you are proud enough to share with people, then the sky is the limit as to how much content you can show and share out with the rest of the world. If you're saying to yourself, this is something that was really important to me. I got exposed to the national trumpet competition as a second semester high school senior. And I thought to myself, holy cow, I want to go there. I need to go there. Right. Now, if you're looking to be a soloist and compete in that area, yeah, it's going to be really important for you to find a pianist who's going to be able to keep up with you no matter what it is you're looking to submit to that competition, as an example, right? Now, I don't recommend you build your entire life over one single competition, but if that's an element of something that's a really large part of what you're looking to do, again, if we're taking this example of I want to be an international touring solo artist sponsored by a brand, that type of deal, and go out and teach people how to do what I'm doing as a performer, then those things are really, really important. As a composer, you might look at things a different way. As a chamber brass musician, you might look at things a different way. There are some incredibly, incredibly strong colleges who have almost no existence of chamber departments. And if you want to be in a brass quintet one day, you probably don't want to go to one of those colleges, right? An example of a school who has done this, who does this phenomenally and has done this phenomenally for well over a decade, is Baylor University, right? With Rudd, you go to there. First of all, he understands things about community that no one else in the business does. Second of all, he's one of the best teachers, if not the best trumpet teacher out there. I don't think anyone's going to be like, no, he's terrible. No, he's amazing. He's great. But one of the things that makes Baylor stand out, if you ever watch their trumpet ensemble perform anywhere, obviously we see them a lot at the national trumpet competition because they get into the finals so very often. So there's a lot of videos of them out there. But if you ever see them work, they are working with great technique. Sure, awesome, that's great. A bunch of people do, but they work with a level of chemistry and emotional understanding that they're able to put together on the stage that really no one else can. And that's an incredible thing, right? So if you're looking at an example where you're looking to say apply to Baylor or you're looking to apply to another school, right? And chamber ensemble is absolutely paramount to you, and you can't imagine your career without doing that. You want to maybe be the next Calypsis Brass or Seraph Brass or American Brass Quintet or Dallas Brass, whatever it is you want to do. You want to be a part of Tinting, right? Tina Ting also has a quintet, or no, it's not a quintet. It's a double quintet, right? There's 10.
Yeah,
I don't remember now. Yeah, it's a dectet. Then those are the types of things that you want to pay attention to. And if you're not going to get those opportunities, then it might hinder your ability to accomplish those goals. So yeah, I mean, these are all factors to look for, and they're important factors. The reason we're bringing these factors up is because if you don't know what you're looking for, then you are going to look for the prettiest school and like, oh, the mountains are really pretty, or oh, I'm by a lake. This lake is really peaceful, and those are really great things. But in many cases, on a surface level standpoint, they're not going to help you to become a better musician and to achieve your goals. Right? Unless, I mean, you could do any sort of mental gymnastics to justify it, right? Like, oh, I have really bad anxiety and being next to a waterfall is really, helps me a lot. And you could do it, but there are other ways for you to do that, right? That's not a reason you should spend 200 grand to go to school. Right? But yeah, those are factors that you want to think about, because otherwise, you'll be looking at the factors that ultimately aren't going to make that big difference, right? So things to
yeah.
consider.
And like, even if you don't know what you want to do, you can branch out so much and like try things out. Like, I don't know, when I was going into university, I was like, oh, you can be in performance or in education. That's the two jobs that you can take.
Yep.
And there are so many other options, like, and you just have to go out and look for it, because everybody's path is going to be different and nobody's going to have the same interests, and no one's going to have the same, the same story, the same experiences in anything. So I feel like so often people will diminish others for their dreams based on, whatever. You're in school, it's like, oh, you're in performance, but you don't want to be in an orchestra. Ew, It's just stuff like that, but you shouldn't let that deter you. You should just do what you want to do because it's your life and nobody else has to live it but you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there are literally hundreds of jobs, like, right? Like when we're saying like, oh yeah, there's a lot of that still in this career. Like, oh yeah, you have to do this or you have to do this. And there are no other jobs. And sometimes there's a third option. It's like, be in an orchestra, be a teacher, or, be in a military band. And then like, oh, there are no other opportunities. It's absolutely false. It's a complete and utter falsehood divorced from reality. There are so many opportunities. There are so many. And maybe we take an entire podcast episode where we just go through the instance. Maybe that's our Chat GPT preview. Maybe we can ask Chat GPT to tell us in its debut on our podcast, spoilers, um, to give us 100 recommendations for jobs for music majors and see what it says.
That's a really good
Maybe,
idea. I'm gonna.
maybe we can do that. But there are a ton. There's like a seemingly endless amount of opportunities out there for musicians that have to do with your career. I mean, you could go any which direction. There are people who become full-time drill writers for marching bands, right, or choreographers for musicals or whatever the case may be. Obviously, we talked about film score composing, which is a specific niche of composing, right? There are people who specialize in solo trumpet piano composing, right? Trumpet and mixed media composing or solo, whatever, it doesn't have to be trumpet. We were a podcast of two trumpet players. But it can be any instrument, right? There are individuals who aren't composers, but they're performers, right? And even when you go into the world of performing, it can be jazz, it can be classical, it can be, we call it crossover. I think it's really silly. I think if you learn to be a musician, you should play jazz and classical, or at least know the basics of it to be able to teach it to other people. We won't go down that road, but it's important to be able to play the instrument fundamentally well. But beyond that, there's so many different opportunities available. You can be a musician in a theme park, right? You could be a musician in an orchestra. Obviously, that's the one we all know about, right? Military band. You could play in the pit orchestra for a musical. You can do any sort of thing. There's a lot that you can do. Kayla, are you still here?
I just come back and you're just talking to the void, and I love it.
I'm still talking. We're recording, so
Yeah.
if I can continue to provide value, I was just like, oh my goodness, her camera's frozen. Oh my goodness, she's off the call. Oh no, what's going on? Did I
We
say something
love
offensive?
no, we love the internet. I had to
Yeah.
log into the internet here at work. So they're like, give us your email address and zip code so that we can provide you with internet. And I'm like, take my information.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, welcome back. Yeah, yeah, but there are so many jobs available, right? That you would be surprised. One of the ones that are starting to get really popular now is the world of in music business, setting freelance musicians up for stable careers. So that can mean anything to the effect of I think I mentioned to you, Kayla, that I signed up for a program that coaches musicians on building sustainable private lesson studios, which has been amazing, by the way. Maybe a guest we bring on in the future. I'll give them a shout out later in a future episode. But it's been really great doing that. They're music social media managers, right? So if you're someone whose passion is content creation, right? Obviously, Kayla and I both do content creation a lot, right? That might be something you're willing to go into, how you use your skills as musicians to build a platform and how to grow on a platform on autopilot, right? That is something that's extremely valuable to musicians. And so if you're able to do that for a career, that's something you might want to consider doing, right? Um, and these are things that you don't instantly know, and you don't find out, from the traditional two-minded track, like I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a performer, right? um, like I said, even within teaching and performing, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs available just within those two niches. But you don't have to do either of those. You can do management, right? You can do any sort of things. You could be the hired trumpet player in bossa nova band on a cruise ship, right? Like there are so many things you can do. Some of those jobs are sweet, by the way, like jobs on cruise ships. Yeah, some of them are pretty cool. So if you're passionate, if you love being overseas, you know, look into those types of things. But there's so many jobs available is the point that we're getting at here. So don't feel like you have to push yourself into one tiny little niche. You're like, well, I don't want to do this, so I don't want to do that. So I guess I'm not cut out to be a musician. Well, if you love music, then you are cut out to be a musician, right? And we talked about before, like, oh, I love musician, but I don't think I'm capable of. Doesn't matter. If you have the passion and you're working towards it, put yourself in that conducive environment, right? So we'll go back to that, the conducive environment to help you to grow. Find the correct teacher who's not going to put a cap on your progress, but is willing to support you and build and grow the skills that you're looking to build and grow and develop. Then just take the steps that are necessary. When you keep taking the steps, you'll reach the point in the staircase where you're able to achieve your dreams, and it'll happen before you know it. But you just have to be able to have that faith in yourself and that confidence in yourself and put yourself on the right foot. This is something I'm really passionate about. So obviously I'm talking a ton for this podcast, but one of the reasons is it's so hard to see that from the beginning. And sometimes we feel like we don't need to, but you absolutely need to. I'm going to give you guys an analogy. Maybe I'll give two analogies. If you imagine, so first of all, you hop on a plane and the plane has, predetermined coordinates. Let's say you're going across seas. Let's say you're in, I don't know, New York in the United States, and you're traveling to London, right? Because you want to see the London Philharmonic, which awesome. I'm jealous, by the way, if you do get to see them. I haven't gotten to see them live. I've never been across seas live, or I've never been across seas at all. I guess
Live.
across seas virtually, sure. Okay, my music has been across seas, but I have not been across seas. But you have predetermined coordinates, right? Let's say that plane, hits turbulence or whatever, and it's not course corrected by the pilot. And at the beginning of your flight, you get 1 degree off course, right? You would not imagine how far off course 1 degree starts from New York to London, right? In most cases, you're going to end up in the ocean. Okay. So, it's important to understand like the direction that you go, even if it's a really small direction, it's going to inform your growth for the future. And the further you go in the wrong direction, the further away from your goal you're going to get. And so it's important for you to understand that if you have that direction of exactly what you want to go, you don't want to accept any less, right? You want to say, I'm headed exactly here. You don't want to go, okay, this is kind of like what I wanted to do. If you're able to find exactly where you're headed for, exactly the teacher, exactly the school, exactly the area that's going to help you to achieve whatever your biggest passion is at the time, while also allowing you to be able to entertain the organic growth and development of said passions, that's where you want to go. Because by the time you graduate, you might be a far cry from what you actually wanted to do. And it may not even be an option anymore as a result of how the world has grown and developed, but as a result of you not staying on that exact direction that you need to go. The other thing is the quality of the teaching. When we say quality of teaching, we're talking about the teaching of the teacher who is the right fit for you, right? Not necessarily the quote unquote best trumpet teacher on the planet. Who even knows who that is? Who cares, right? But what is the best fit for you and what you're looking for? That's going to accelerate the rate of your progress. Okay. Now we know this with things like compound interest. We know this with things like cars that go 0 to 60. If you're really big into races, we know there's a lot of instances where we can see this. But if you accelerate your progress at a faster pace, and then it continues to increase at the same pace as someone who had a smaller acceleration, the distance from which you travel becomes significantly larger over time as well. Right. So those are our two analogies: is your ability to go 5% faster, 5% more efficiently, right? And to go in the direction that is as attuned to what you want to do as possible. If you're able to do those two simple things, multiplied over a 4-year degree, right? The difference is astounding. You would not believe. Right? And I have instances of, colleagues and musicians who, well, I really want to do this, but, I don't think I can make it to this college, so I'll go to this college that does kind of the same thing. And they are out doing things that have nothing to do with what their dreams and goals were. They never got there, and regardless, notwithstanding whether or not they graduated and put all the time towards that, they just, the amount of time it would take them to course correct after graduating to get to where they needed to be, they just weren't able to do it in the amount of time they needed to pay their bills, and they end up picking up other jobs that aren't a part of their passion. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with picking up other jobs. But if your goal is to be a musician and you're not a musician, right, then you haven't reached your goal, right? And we want you to reach your goal. That's why we're having this conversation. We don't want you to have to say, to give up your goal because you weren't relentless enough towards achieving that goal, or because you just didn't know what you didn't know. So that's a really important thing to remember as you go through that process. But you put yourself in the right direction. So you make sure you don't get 1 degree off course, right? When you course correct, the distance will be a much larger distance to go in order for you to go back and, triangulate your location and then figure out that desired future state, and how far you are from that, and to turn back to where you need to be, right? That's going to take a lot more distance than it would take. And then if you're not going in the efficient manner of having the correct environment, et cetera, that helps accelerate your rate at an area that's necessary, it's going to take you longer to get there, right? So you'll travel further and it'll take you longer. And in some cases, longer will mean years, further will mean years. And you can't always afford to do that in a like I said, in a world where an economy is based off of inflation, so that things continue to grow, right? When you make investments, they grow. When you buy houses, they end up being appreciating assets. It's a good thing. Inflation is a good thing. However, we want to operate in a world where we understand that things continue to progress in that manner, and that time is very, very important. You want time to be on your side. So the moment you know what your dream is, you want to be as efficient as possible towards achieving that dream. And I promise you 99.99999% of the time, that beautiful brand new facility that was just built for that wonderful concert hall and those amazing acoustics, it just isn't going to provide that value for you in a way that a great teacher will provide that value for you. So just keep that in mind when you're applying for colleges.
So much information.
So much. I'm going to try to
So
stop
much.
talking now. I'm done.
No, no, you're good. Before we finish, I had like two thoughts that I wanted to say. And I think the first one is that you don't need to know what you want to do as long as you have an idea of where you're going. And there is no wrong decision for what you want to do. And you can change your mind multiple times. Um, I thought that I wanted to be a trumpet soloist, sort of like what Matilda Lloyd's doing. I think, like, in my mind, I still want to do that, but I have found so much joy in doing what I'm doing right now with like the theme park playing and working with my students. And like, I don't know, every day I wake up and I do that and I'm like, wow, like I'm actually, I feel like I'm at a really good place in my career and in my life, and it is nothing like I ever imagined, 10 years ago. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, even if you choose not to be a performer, not to be a teacher, and you choose to be in composition, or working in the tech side of things, like that, choosing a job that's not like specifically always performing music all the time does not make you any less of a musician. And I spent a lot of time in my undergrad believing that, oh, if I choose to do something, it's going to make me less of a musician. But you're always going to be a musician. And we need everybody in this industry. Like, it's not just performers, it's people who know how to do audio engineering, people who know how to mix, people who know how to do like all of the stuff behind the scenes that nobody even talks about. Like, they're important. They're what makes music possible. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
It's so powerful. Imagine a world where imagine my world, right? We can start with that, where you are a composer who loves brass instruments and has experience with brass pedagogy, writing for brass instruments. How many brass instrumentalists are going to want to play your music because it's idiomatic, right? Now go to a different world, insert whatever your passion is, right? Let's say you really, really love live video production. How much value are you going to be able to provide to so many colleges, to programs, et cetera, that are running performances for their, state-of-the-art ensembles that don't have state-of-the-art equipment or training from the individuals who are, for example, live streaming their events, right? And it's one camera, and it's a camera that was purchased in 1980, and it's 480 pixels, and it's connected wirelessly instead of connected via Ethernet cord, and the computer can't handle the bandwidth that's necessary, right? And all of those things. And maybe you can show up and you can say, listen, I understand how to do this. I'm going to make these few short changes, and then I'll sit in the booth. I can give you a multicam presentation. It's going to look like a professional published event. And then every time anyone wants to audition for your school, they're going to see a state-of-the-art ensemble with state-of-the-art recording equipment in a live setting, right? How incredibly valuable is that? You want to be a private lessons teacher. I'll use this since you mentioned your path in your career. I wanted to be a high school band director, and then I became a private lessons teacher and a composer, right? And it wasn't that I fell out of love with teaching a band, with being a high school band director. I still love it every bit as I did, if not more. But what I realized is even more rewarding for me than that is the opportunity to take those situations that you're not able to explore as a high school band director that you really want to be able to explore, and bridge the gap between those things, right? To take the students who need that individual instruction or who want that individual instruction and take them as far as they need to, so that they can go back and share their experiences for the benefit of the entire rest of the ensemble, right? That's amazing. I had no idea I loved that so much, but here we are, and now I do, right? What type of a market is out there for those people who go into those things and into those areas for careers that you might not even ever consider if you're just trying to say, I need to be a public school music teacher, or I need to be in a professional ensemble, and that's it. There's no other jobs available. You find those other jobs, right? And a good way to look at that, man, maybe we need a part two of this, right? Where part two is like the careers that are available, right? And when we go and they list like 100 careers, maybe take a couple and talk about it. I don't know, maybe spitballing ideas for new podcasts during the podcast, but going through that process of saying, well, what is it that professional musicians really want? What is it that teachers really need? And saying, is that a passion of mine? Can I provide that? And going down that area, you're going to see a lot of value because there's a lot of scarcity in that. We can start talking about business. Boy, that's another, we don't have time to talk about that today. But the value of scarcity in business when you are, the option or one of the best options or the best option, it's like the rules are all yours. So anyway, those are things to consider. Kayla, you have to go.
I have to go toot my tutor. Don't forget to stay up to date with us on social media. You can find us on YouTube at ChatTPT and individually on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at TPT Solo and at MS Grant Music. We love hearing from you and staying connected with our amazing music community. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it valuable, please consider sharing it with your fellow trumpet players and music enthusiasts. Your support helps us grow and reach even more people. Please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. It would mean the world to us. Your reviews help others discover our show, and we're always eager to hear your feedback. Thanks for tuning in and being part of the ChatTPT family. We'll be back soon with more inspiring conversations and valuable insights. Until next time, keep playing those beautiful notes and stay connected.